Welcome, everybody, to the show. Joining me is our co-host and fellow traveler, Dan the Dan Noodles, man, the Chester Allen Arthur of Wargaming. And joining us as our very special guest, the audience will understand the jokes, Dan, don't worry about it. Try to keep up. Joining us as a very special guest is Mr. Clint Warren-Davey from the sunny land of Australia. I did get that right?
Yeah, that's right. I am in Australia, correct.
Awesome. So it is approximately 72 a.m. at their time right now. So thanks for joining us at this unwholesome hour.
Oh, that's right, man. Well, it's New South Wales is where I am, the state.
Oh, Jesus!
So I'm very close to Sydney, and it's 9:30 in the morning today, and it's a Wednesday today for me, and I think it's a Tuesday for you guys. So
it is. So that's actually not too bad.
It's in the future,
man.
You don't even look like Christopher Lloyd or Marty McFly. I'm not sure what's going on with that. Anyway, Clint, I wanted to bring you on to talk about 1 Hour World War II. So let me start out the conversation, though, by asking, what got you into wargaming in the first place? What is your personal history with wargames?
Well, the first war game that I really got into was Axis and Allies, and that's a really long time ago. This is probably 20 years ago now that I first played it.
Well, so you were one when you began playing Axis and Allies?
I'm actually 36.
Oh dear.
36,
Yeah, I'm 36.
Holy moly!
I've got some catching up to do, and by catching up, I mean backing up.
Low, baby.
I too am 36.
I think you got bigger forearms than me, though, Ardwulf. I think that's fair to say.
That's the counter clipping. That's the counter clipping. Forearms are exceptionally well exercised. So Axis and Allies, and I think a lot of people, that was their gateway into war games that were maybe steps up from Risk or Stratego or something like that, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and I'm not really an old school grognard or anything like that. I mean, I didn't do much hex and counter gaming, but I've done since Axis and Allies, I've gone into a lot of the things like Star Wars Rebellion and War of the Rings. So there's big name, big fantasy sci-fi kind of games. But I really got into the Coin series as of about 4 or 5 years ago. Love the Coin series. Which I know is not everyone's cup of tea, but I just really like it. But then I've also got into just games like Undaunted, Normandy. So these kind of simpler, lighter kind of war games. But I do have Mark Herman's Empire of the Sun, and I've got Mark Simonich's Normandy 44. So I do have a few hex and counter games as well. But it all started with Axis and Allies. And 1 Hour World War II is kind of my attempt at fixing a lot of the problems that I had with Axis and Allies. You can see it in that way.
Mm-hmm.
I was actually thinking of getting Axis and Allies. Should I?
Well,
I haven't played Axis and Allies since the original edition, so don't even ask me.
The original edition is from the 80s, I think, probably 1984.
Well, no, Clint, the reason why I ask is because I got a friend who's we're Canadian, so we're drinking beer, getting stoned, and stuff like that.
As one does in Canada.
Yeah, I lived in Canada. That's what I did. Yeah.
And so, he looks at a board game and he says, take out a board game, Dan. Let's do something. And it was Downfall by John Butterfield and,
Nobody's stupid enough to do that at my place, Dan, because they're getting case blue if they do.
Yeah, no. So I said, forget it, man. So,
bust out a war game, you say?
Jesus, I'm trying to
No problem. Go ahead, Dan. That was my phone.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
Who was that?
That's Yes.
Oh, hold on. That was Fragile.
Yes.
God, I heard that piece so many times I'm gonna puke. But
there you go.
Clint.
Yes.
What the hell was I saying? What was I saying?
So you had the chance to play Axis and Allies, but you haven't actually.
I don't know. So, anyways, we played a Euro game. We played Carcassonne, and he got into it because he never gamed, So I just wanted him to get into the let's game type thing. So that's why I'm thinking Axis and Allies, man.
Yeah.
You can get into that or Command and Colors Ancients.
Yes, Commander Colors would be good. Yeah, or if they're into World War II, there's Memoir 44, which is the Commander.
Nah, he's not into World War II. That's what I said.
Okay, I was gonna say, yeah. Look, Axis and Allies is a really good intro war game. The only problem is if you are playing it properly with the victory conditions as written in the rulebook, it takes all day for even longer.
That's not
no one plays it that way. This kind of thing would be sort of unacceptable in board games now. But for some reason, back when it was first released, you could release a game where it's basically unplayable out of the box. You have to play the game for about 16 hours to get to a real conclusion. Because
you're talking about Axis and Allies.
I'm talking about Axis and Allies. I'm talking about. I mainly played the global edition, which is the big version. But even the normal one, you're looking at 10, 12 hours to play it properly because the victory condition in the box, not the 1942 edition. I'm talking about the original one and the global edition, is the Allies have to take Berlin and Tokyo to win, which takes forever because you have to grind your way in there step by step. And halfway through the game, you know who's going to win. You know if the Axis or the Allies are going to win, and the final 6 hours is kind of just.
It's probably easier introducing him to Case Blue, for God's sake.
Yeah, well, because it's. I don't know. It's a slow grind of just taking space by space, and you just keep shunting units. It becomes less interesting after all. So most people who play it, especially the global version, the big version, they use house rules to make it playable. They change the victory conditions, and I think some of the versions have different victory conditions where it is playable within a few hours. But even then, it's a long slog for what it is. It's a dice chucking dudes on a map war game. It's a beer and pretzels war game. It is not a serious hex and counter title at all. It's not very historically accurate. But if you house rule it, depending on what edition you use, you can get maybe play a game in an evening. For you, my friend, if you have someone interested in getting into wargaming, my game, 1 Hour World War II, is what that is meant to be for. It's meant to be for those who are not really. So that's what I'm trying to do. Is an entry level war game that you can bring over people that play something like Carcassonne or something like Settlers of Catan or whatever, and you say you want to try some World War II strategic level gaming. Put this on the table. You can play it in 1 hour. That's the goal for my game. Now
it's global, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so you're doing all of World War II Europe, and that's a tall order, man. That's something. Probably the closest I've seen. I always get the name of this game wrong. Probably the closest I've seen is I think it's called Struggle for Europe from Worthington, and it plays in about an hour or maybe two. But it's just Europe, right? I mean, so that's a tall order. Now it's is it a point-to-point map? Am I remembering that correctly?
Yes, it is. Yeah.
Okay.
Point-to-point.
So how many total spaces are you looking at in that point-to-point map? No one knows what's happened to Dan. He'll figure it out.
Yeah. It's I think it's 31. 31
okay.
Spaces. Yeah.
Okay. Any other signature mechanics there? Are there cards? Is it just dice?
No dice, no cards. You can use dice. You can play with or without dice. It's a small modifier to the battles, but you can play without dice. No cards. There's no sort of chit pull out of a bag or anything like that. You have the counters on the map, and it's basically all about decision making. You have your faction sheet in front of you, which tells you the actions you can choose. And then next to those actions are responses that other countries can choose to jump in on your turn. So you're constantly interrupting each other's turns with responses. But it's a very, very stripped down game. And it's really just boiling it down to the strategic level decision making. So it's not getting anything into the tactics or the operational level stuff. It is purely the strategic level decision making. So to give you an idea of the scale, I mean, Germany has a total of 10 pieces like on the map at any one time. They'll only have a maximum of 10 pieces. And then USA is similar. So it's a piece on the map is going to be like a very large army group, something like that. Yeah.
I found that a lot of the hardcore end of the Hex and Counter folks tend to forget the amount of work that is added just by handling large numbers of pieces, because after all, it's not really that big of a difference between a game with 2,000 pieces on the map and a game with 3,000 pieces on the map, right? At that point, you're definitely crazy. So
yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So have you got a publisher lined up yet?
Yes. Yeah.
Awesome.
Worthington. So
well, there you go.
Nice.
That's perfect. That'll go well.
So you spoke to Grant, yeah? You spoke to Grant?
Yeah, briefly. Mainly Mark Wiley, who's the developer over there. He's working, working with Grant and Mike, and if you look at their past lineup of games, it actually fits pretty well in what they do. They have done games like this before, and their component quality is really good. I like what they do. I had a choice of a couple of different I think about 4 or 5 publishers wanted this, but I went with Worthington, and we'll see. I think I made the right choice. I think they're going to make a pretty.
You know what? If you're saying this is like an introductory type war game, yes, you did the right choice.
Yeah, and you were about to say Kickstarter starts when?
Next month. So
next month. Okay.
May or June this year. Yeah.
Okay, so it'll be up soon.
But yeah,
Clint,
it'll be up very soon.
I'll give you my email. It's no enemies here, whatever. But I'll give you my email. Let me know when your game is coming out, and I'll push it on the YouTube.
Everybody send Dan your dick pics.
No.
So.
But you made me think of something. I've always wanted to buy that party game, Memo Boosin.
I've never heard of it.
It's you got to match the right breast to the person.
This is obviously a Canadian experience that we're talking about here.
It's German.
Because or Japanese, it could be. They've got some pretty wacky media over in Japanese.
You invited me here to talk about war games. I don't know what we're talking.
We've got some subject matter experts in the chat here, folks. I'll leave you folks to it. Thank you very much for your contributions.
Carl Creeder, I don't know how to pronounce his name.
Crater.
Carl Weeder. It's his 20th anniversary of his
36th birthday. Yeah.
What the hell is he talking about? This
No,
guy?
this is completely logical.
What's the matter with that?
I completely get where Carl's coming from. Now, see, I am 26 years old, as you can see, but my colon is 54. So that creates issues.
That's disgusting.
You're telling me.
For God's sakes, man.
Anyway, we've derailed Dan yet again.
Oh, yeah, Christ, I gotta get a colon checkup soon.
So what was that do you think was your most powerful mechanical technique to make the game come in at that target time length, right? Because to me that's the big ask here is just making it play that quickly. That's a huge factor.
Well, it's basically comes down to working backwards. So if I start with a 1 hour time frame and I go, if a typical action is going to take about 30 to 40 seconds, and an action is going to be like, say, you're moving 2 pieces here, or you're moving a cube here, whatever. Say it's going to take 30, 40 seconds to do an action. And then I figure, well, I can probably fit in about 80 to 90 actions and still come in under time. So I work backwards and I go, right, if I'm going to have if the game's going to be a total of about 80 to 90 actions, then I got to divide up those actions between the different countries. And I go, well, obviously the more powerful economies are going to have more actions. So the USA is going to have to be able to do more stuff than, say, Japan or the UK. So I go, how many things should the USA be able to do year by year on the map that I've got? So say by 1944, the USA should be able to have troops fighting in France and in Italy and be making landings in the Pacific and maybe doing 1 or 2 other things here and there. So by the end of the war, the USA should be having, say, 5 or 6 actions a turn. And then early in the war, I could say reasonably that, say, the Soviet Union, the UK, the US are probably going to have 1 action a turn early on because they're not doing very much. And then Germany and Japan, they average out to about 2 or 3 actions per turn. So when I work backwards from that and just allocate the number of actions over time and base it on each country's economy and what they were able to do, then I can kind of have a rough structure. So it's all based on the action economy. And those number of actions, they differ by country and by year. So by the time you get to the end of the war, the USA is getting about 6 actions a turn. Germany's getting 3. Japan's getting 2. UK, Soviet Union getting 3 each as well. And then if you play that out, you can do basically a historical narrative of the war turn by turn. You can do what every country was actually doing at the time.
Oh, that's neat. That's a neat.
Yeah. So, Clint, this is dice driven, right?
No, not dice driven. The only place that dice shows up is in the battle system, optionally, where you can use dice to modify your score. But the dice will only ever add a maximum of +1 or +2 to your score. Okay. And the numbers are low. So we're talking, say, I've got 3 armies and you've got 1. I've got a score of 3. You've got a score of 1. So a number of 1 or 2 is a big deal. Like if you manage to get a +2, that's going to allow you to fight at 3 to 1 odds. But you can play the game without the dice, which is how I play it. I play it with no dice. So there is no hidden information. There is no randomness. It's almost like chess. So, like I said, no cards, nothing random, nothing hidden. So it really is a brain burner. But because it is has that chess-like element to it, when we were playtesting, me and my developer, Mark Wiley over at Worthington Games, we did a lot of intense playtesting late last year. And we were playtesting it so much that we could play in our heads. We could message each other and go like, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. And then we could play out half the game in our heads, just imagining where the pieces are, which is kind of like a lot of chess experts can do. They can play a game in their head and just remember where the pieces are because there's no having to roll dice or anything like that. So we were playing the game in our head. And then when we got home back to it in front of our computer or we have a physical prototype set up, we put the pieces where they are and continue because eventually the amount of information gets too big. But we could play half a game just by texting because it's deterministic and you can readily imagine where the pieces are. But there are no dice, and I chose to not use dice for that reason because there's a couple of reasons, but it's mainly because I wanted pure strategy, pure decision making. Also have a lot of friends who are very unlucky. I've got one of my best friends who plays a lot of games. He's extremely unlucky, and I'm not even. He's the unluckiest person. And
I would like to meet this opponent personally.
There are people like that, man.
There are people, and I'm not even making this up. He will fail every critical dice roll every game 100% of the time. And he loses so many games. And every time I crack open a new game with him, he says, "Does it have dice?" And if the answer is yes, he's like, "I'm not playing it. I'm not rolling." So I wanted to have a diceless option in there. Yeah.
You know, Clint, I hope your game takes off because Artie, I think Clint is just a little bit better looking than Dave Thompson. What do you say?
Oh, I don't know. I don't know. We're gonna have to get these two in the same room at a convention at some point and 50-gallon drum of baby oil, and then we can decide.
And I don't know, Clint, aren't you beating off the dingoes and the spiders where you are? What the hell's going on?
Yeah, basically every animal here is trying to kill you all the time. That's how it is.
Mm-hmm.
That's how it is. Yeah.
That is the reputation of Australia. That Vegemite pretty much covers it.
You guys, hold on. I'm a big not Vegemite. What's the other one there?
Marmite.
Marmite. I haven't tried Vegemite because we can't get it.
Do you have World Market in Canada?
World Market.
World Market.
Canada Market. What's the matter?
I don't know. We have World Market here in Ohio, and they have Vegemite actually.
Yeah,
it's people like you who ruined the world, who shop for the World Market. I buy local.
Buys local. Well, you can't buy a local Vegemite, can you?
No, I can't.
So, Vegemite or Marmite, Clint?
Vegemite.
Vegemite. Okay.
Yeah, Marmite's gross. Got to have Vegemite.
I've never had. I like Marmite. I'm not sure I've ever tried Vegemite. So
try it.
I mean, I don't eat it with a spoon out of the jar, but because that's crazy.
We don't do that either. None of us do that here. You have it on toast with butter. That's all. That's the only way you can eat it. You have it on toast with lots of butter.
Okay.
Well, you know what? I had Marmite with blue cheese. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, you like that. Okay. Well,
yeah, man. Because I'm an old man, Clint. You're just a young buck. You haven't lived. You don't know what's going on.
Apparently not. So we are getting some questions about Werewolf, which is another of your designs that has been in the pipeline. We've talked about that in the past. It's in the pipeline over at Legion, and it sounds like it may have just hit its number. Am I right about that? Are we right about that?
It did within the last couple of days. Yeah.
Okay.
So that was the email I got. Okay.
There you go.
So 253 pre-orders we're at now, and I needed 250. So it's funny. I was when that number ticked over to 250. I was in the middle of a Zoom call with Volko Runke, who's the guy that made the coin series originally. Mm-hmm. And while I was talking to him, it ticked over to 250. Well, and I looked at it, I was like, "This is what a coincidence," because he obviously made the coin series. I was inspired by that to make Werewolf. But so I've spoken to Randy over at Legion. It will go into production this year. He's going to go through the files now and do some final development and testing and so on. But yes, Werewolf has made the cut. Legion's going to make it. It's hopefully going to be done this year. So that's been a long time coming. Last time I spoke with you, Ardwulf, I think it was probably 2022.
That sounds about right.
Yeah, I think that's the last time we spoke about it. It's been a long time to get those pre-orders up. But, Legion's a smaller publisher, and doesn't have as much of a marketing reach as someone like GMT. But look, we got there in the end.
Well, they got Randy, and that's the marketing department is Randy.
That's what I mean. Yeah, I mean, that's a lot of people don't realize this, but a lot of the wargame publishers are really just like one or two guys, and that's it.
I heard your name dropping Volko. Now, the only reason why an Australian would be speaking to an American would be on a professional business. Are you a CIA-ish type? Because you don't mess with Volko.
No, but I know his background, and I know.
You know his background.
Yeah. So
why do you know his background, Clint?
Yeah. Well,
it's top secret. You're not allowed to know.
That's right.
How he knows.
That's right. Yeah, but I do actually do some work for the Australian military as a consultancy basis. But I'll keep that under wraps.
I'm going to shut up now.
Yeah.
He could tell you, but he'd have to kill you. And in order to kill you, he'd have to come to Canada, and that would be a huge inconvenience. Don't make Clint have to do that.
You mentioned Undaunted Normandy, so made me think of David Thompson. And so, Clint, like I said, I hope your game goes crazy. And the thing is that I don't even know what the hell I was talking about. What the hell was I talking about?
We're not sure either if it helps you at all.
I forgot.
You talked with Volko, Marmite and Blue Cheese, and Werewolf was the last thing we were talking
Welcome to the show.
Well, what I wanted to say is that it's funny how those guys like Volko, Mark Herman, David Thompson, I forget the other designers, but I guess I named all the important ones.
Well, go ahead, Dan.
Yeah, so it's funny how helpful these guys are, man. It's
absolutely,
it's just beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that these guys might be annoyed that people are using their ideas.
That's right.
I mean, it's like I emailed Volko and I said, look, I'm going to make this game that's inspired by the Coin series, but it's not a GMT product. It's not officially part of your Coin series. And I thought he's going to tell me, no, you can't do that.
But just
he's like, no, go ahead. Yeah, it does. It's not an issue. And then he's willing to. He looked at the rules. He said, "Yep, looks good. Looks like a great game."
Is that something, man?
It's so good because it's this community of board game designers and publishers and developers. It's a really, really nice community. People help each other out. If you send an email to someone and say, "Look, can you just have a look at this game?" They'll go, "Sure, I'll take a look at it for you." And there's no possibility. It's so good. It's so good.
I find that so fantastic. And you know what? Being a longtime musician, it's completely different in the music world. You cannot go. It's ridiculous. And these guys, and that's what's beautiful about this. I guess I'm going to say this. I don't want to say hobby. This
well, you can say industry. I say it's an industry, but even that is not right because it's not just about making money. It's
about losing money, but not too fast.
Is that what you thought?
Best of luck.
Yeah.
No, but it's just great because you can go right to the top. These guys are going to help. I mean, you ask Volko, can you read my rule book? I mean, he has a country to take over somewhere. Why would he want to read the rule book? You know what I'm saying?
Well, I can make the comparison to the movie industry. So if you're watching a movie and you're confused by it, you're not sure where they made a certain decision, you can't email the director and say, why is that? Like I was watching Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and I thought I really want to just send a message to Quentin Tarantino and ask him, what do you mean by that? And I thought, we can't do that. But I'm playing a coin game, and if I have a question, I could direct message Volko and go, hey, why did you put this in the game? And he can answer. Like that's the person that made the product. You can just talk to them online, and it's
awesome.
It's so good. It's like there's no other form of entertainment that is like that. Even if you're watching like pro sports or whatever, you can't just direct message the people who make the product and say, why did you do this? Like, or I really like this, or I really don't like this. And there's so much just open communication. It's so good. If you're getting into war game design,
it's like being able to contact your president and saying, hey, buddy, you really screwed up on this one. Can you explain why?
Yeah, there's an upside to being as small and close-knit a hobby as we are, and we are a small and close-knit hobby, right? And Volko in particular is known to be really supportive and generous with his time and advice. If you've ever taken a peek, and you probably have, Clint, the coin design server, the Discord server, and there's a one for Levy Campaign too. There's just dozens of ongoing efforts in there, and there's Volko helping everybody out, right? So.
honestly, man, it still blows my mind. It blows my mind. And by the way, Clint.
Yeah.
Why coin? Why coin?
Why coin? That's a great question.
See, if you watched our previous interview, Dan, you would know, because we talked about this.
We did, yeah.
Why coin?
Well, I was initially skeptical about playing coin games. As I played my first coin game probably 2021, and a friend of mine had said, "Look, I bought this game Cuba Libre. It's about the Cuban insurgency in the 1950s." And I go, I'm not really interested in Cuba in the 1950s. The theme doesn't strike me. And then he goes, but there's 4 factions and they all play totally differently. One's the government, one is syndicates running casinos, and then one is a guerrilla movement, whatever. And I go, so it's a war game, but one of the factions is running casinos and is trying to make money. I go, okay, that's interesting. I haven't seen that before. So I thought I'll give this a go. I read the rules, have no idea what the rules mean. Like, it's just totally confusing. I have no idea how it works. And I go, what is this? Watch a video, like a playthrough. Read the example. Okay, now I'm starting to get this. We play the game, love it, immediately love it. And I don't know what it is about. I think it's the asymmetry. It's all the factions working differently. It's the combination of the political and the economic as well as the military. In Cuba Libre and in Andean Abyss, there's little tokens that represent either cash or in Andean Abyss, it's cocaine shipments, which can be captured and traded and fought over. And I thought there's very few war games where you have that kind of resource management, asymmetry, and weaving in the political with the military in such a unique way. So I immediately fell in love with it. And the first game that I wanted to make that was as soon as I played Cuba Libre, I thought I want to make a coin game. And I thought the first one I was going to make was actually about Cuba in the 1500s. So which wouldn't immediately strike you as an idea for a coin game. But I thought 4 factions: pirates, natives, merchants, and
Bolivar.
Yeah, so I thought, there's maybe, and I doodled around with that, and then thought, okay, that might have some promise. And then I was listening to a podcast, and someone had mentioned werewolf IEDs blowing up American Jeeps in Germany. And I know IEDs from the Iraq and Afghanistan war. Had no idea what the werewolves were. Started looking into the history of the werewolves, and I thought, oh wow, there's a German insurgency afterwards. World War II ends in 1945, but there are still German insurgents fighting in the mountains.
Absolutely, yeah.
So I go, that's really interesting. No one's made a game on it.
That's true.
Coin. So
you shouldn't have said it.
Yeah. Anyway, that's why I'm interested in it. So that's the origin story of Werewolf, and I've just been hooked on coin ever since. I've been playing. I've got Cuba Libre, Andean Abyss, Fire in the Lake, Colonial Twilight, and
Oh my God, you're hooked. You're hooked.
Yeah, I am hooked on it. Yeah.
It's like what Volko gave you the first one free. What's
No, that's a gateway drug. Cuba Libre.
It is interesting. Part of this is probably Volko. And his advocacy for what he's trying to do and his generosity in helping other folks out. But what is it about the coin system that makes it so attractive to so many people doing so many different subjects, right? I mean, I could sit there and play a coin game, and I've played a bunch of them, and generally I've enjoyed the experiences, even when I haven't picked the game up. And you can easily say, I could redo this, except instead of Cuba in the 1950s, it's Star Wars. And you can totally make is the basic structure of it just that flexible? Is that what it is?
I think that's what it is.
Hold on. And that's for me what makes it look, for lack of a better word, it makes it, I don't know, really asymmetrical and a little bit cheesy.
Yeah, I see what you mean. Yeah, I get. So the system can be adapted in so many different ways. Maybe it seems like it's a bit too generic. I get that, and you can, if you really want to, you can turn anything into a 4-player asymmetric game. You could, if you really stretch the limits of it. Like, you could even turn World War II on the Eastern Front into a 4-player asymmetric coin style game. If you really wanted to, you could stretch the theme to fit it. You could do that. And so I get why where people go, oh, well, we're jumping around from 1950s Cuba, 1990s Colombia, then we're going back to ancient Rome occupying Gaul, and then we're going ahead to Red Dust Rebellion, which is set on Mars, and we've got 1980s Philippines, and you think this system must be so generic, You can just slap anything on it, and it's actually the same criticism that gets leveled at Euro games. Like a Euro game,
right.
The theme is not strong. It's just a set of mechanics, and you can paste anything onto it. And I do get that, and that's partially true. But I put the Coin series in the same category of games as things. So use more recent examples, things like Pax Pamir or Alex Knight's Land and Freedom. Or Root, which is a spin-off of Coin, and Root is a fair game. It's not really a historical war game at all. But all those games are about they're about using Euro style mechanics, which by that I mean no combat results table, very few dice, not using lots and lots of counters, not a big hex map, using Euro style mechanics to bring alive military, political, and economic decision making in one system. That's what.
Can you put those words in order from 1 to 4?
Can you rephrase that using only one syllable words for Dan?
Military and political. I think of it as political, underhanded, sell drugs, military.
Yeah,
that's what I think when I hear Coin.
Well, I see. What it opens your eyes to is say something like the game I'm working on right now is about Poland in World War II. So I'm working on another design. Which someone in the chat has just asked about, which I'll explain briefly here. I'm working on a game on the Polish underground. Now, that is so interesting because, as you know, Poland is occupied by the Germans and the Soviets. They fight. There's an insurgency being fought by the Poles against the Germans and the Soviets. The Poles know that eventually the Soviets are going to come in and take over. They know from 1944 onwards, they know the Soviets are coming in. They know the Soviets are going to win.
Because they're here.
Yeah, because they're right here. The Soviets are going to win this. Now, the decision making for the Poles, and keep in mind there's 4 distinct Polish factions within the underground. All of those factions are simultaneously waging a guerrilla war, negotiating with the Allies and the Soviets. All right, so you can imagine an insurgent faction sending delegates to see Roosevelt or Churchill or Stalin and negotiate with them. And then they're also trying to set up their political infrastructure to win elections after the war. So you might have an insurgent group in Poland that is simultaneously launching raids to capture weapons and free political prisoners and assassinate NKVD officers. They're sending one of their representatives to Washington to talk to Roosevelt, and they're trying to run a political campaign so that when the war's over, they can win elections. And they're doing all 3 of those things. And you can see the political and the military on this spectrum, where the military side of it is where you're using violence and force, and then the political side is the same type of thing, but you're not using as much violence. You're trying to persuade people. You're trying to persuade voters to vote for you. You're trying to build a coalition. You're trying to negotiate or whatever. But it is fundamentally the same spectrum. You're trying to achieve a certain political outcome, which might be your faction controls Poland after the war. Let's say that's your goal. You're trying to be the dominant faction in Poland after the war. But to do that, you have to use a whole array of tools. Some of them are military, some of them are not. Some of them might be you negotiate with the Allies to let them do supply drops over Polish territory so you can capture some weapons to lead an uprising in Warsaw, to take the capital before the Soviets arrive, to purely use as a bargaining chip with the Allies. This is the kind of decision making that goes through. I go, that's really interesting. It's way more interesting than, let's say, I'm the Soviets, you're the Germans, and we just pound each other into one of us.
I see. Okay.
Yeah. So,
but what about Clint? What about a game? I understand what you're saying. I understand. What about a game that involves that conflict, but with politics and a game like what the hell's that game that the Australian company made? World at War, for God's sakes. What about a game like that involves politics and this and that? Is there any correlation to a Coin thing? No, eh?
You're thinking of World in Flames, but
yeah.
I guess another example that would be the whole card-driven game series, like all CDGs, from We the People through to Paths of Glory, through to, I guess you could put Twilight Struggle in there as well. Card-driven war games are trying to do that as well. So I get what you're saying. You can have both, and like Paths of Glory is a great example of that.
Okay.
Ted Race's classic World War I game, heaps of politics, but I don't think you really have politics in a war game if there's only 2 players. I think you need more than 2.
I see what you're saying.
Yeah, because if it's you versus me, I can't make a deal with you, right? I'm competing with you. I can only win if you lose. But as soon as we introduce a third or a fourth player, we have politics, because I can make a deal with the third guy against you, and I might betray him later, but I'm using him against you, and then you might do the same thing. So you need to have. I think you need to have more than two for it to be truly political, if that makes sense.
Yes,
makes sense to me. Certainly, it's a different kind of experience if you don't have a third player or faction or fourth or whatever. Be 2+ whatever. So, John Stanley, thank you so much for the support. Do you have, this is going to be prior, so when does the Polish Underground game start, or is that decided yet?
It's probably going to be, it starts in 1942. It was originally going to start in 1944, but I'll push it back to 1942 to fit in a few things, mainly the assassination of Sikorsky and the revelations about the Katyn massacre, which made Stalin stop recognizing the government in exile in London. So I pushed it back to fit in a few more things. That game is still a long way off being published. It's got a publisher, but it's still in development. It's going to be eventually published by Phalanx Games. So
okay. Hit the big time there, right?
Well, we'll see. Yeah.
It's going to come with a 6-foot gold statue of somebody. We're not sure who yet.
Well, hopefully we are going to have some very nice art for it. I'll tell you that.
I would imagine.
Clint, you being Australian, didn't you want to do anything? I'm going to say World War II, Australian, Japan, Britain kind of stuff.
Well, yeah, I do. I do eventually want to do that. I have actually already designed an Australian World War I game, which this will probably be published next year by Dietz Foundation on Gallipoli. I don't know if you know much about Gallipoli. That's remember me a little bit. So the Gallipoli campaign for Australians it's like, say, if you're an American, it's like the equivalent of D-Day and Gettysburg together.
Seriously,
it's hugely significant. So every Australian knows about Gallipoli. It's not just the moment where we fight a big battle and we lose a lot of people, so it's a tragedy. But it's also our birth as a nation. It's the first time we fight together as a nation in a large scale. So Gallipoli was a campaign where Australians and New Zealanders and some British and French as well land at the Gallipoli Peninsula to fight Turkey in World War I. It's a bit of a sideshow. It's not on the Western Front or the Eastern Front. It's trying to open another front and knock Turkey out of the war.
Yet another of Churchill's brilliant ideas.
Yeah. And this is, again, with so Australia's relationship with Churchill is very strained as well. So a lot of Australians don't like Churchill because he sent us to Gallipoli and then he abandoned us in World War II.
Well, the British always happy to die to fight to the last Australian, Canadian, Scotsman, or New Zealander. Or Indian.
Yeah, he was a bit of a son of a bitch too. Sometimes.
Yeah, I know. We've got a bit of a strained relationship, and also because the Churchill was asking us to keep our best division in North Africa during World War II when we really wanted to come home and fight the Japanese. He was saying that we need it in North Africa to fight the Germans, and so there was this whole argument about that. Eventually, we ended up bringing him home, but in the critical moment when Australia was under threat in early 1942. We still had our best troops deployed in North Africa fighting at El Alamein, when we would have much rather have them in New Guinea defending the approaches to the homeland. But anyway,
obviously.
And after the fall of Singapore, the British couldn't really help us out either because their main naval squadron in the Pacific was gone. We asked them, when are you going to send help? And they're like, well, we can't. We're fighting the Germans. You guys are on your own, and we need your men in North Africa. So that moment, 1942 is when Australia stops being a British colony and becomes an American colony. And I say that without any disrespect to Americans at all. We are part of the American empire or part of the American
security.
Yeah, you guys have been politically closer to the U.S. since about then.
We have. And we love Americans in Australia for that good because the Americans
come on, stop kissing ass.
We bring you our rock and roll and blue jeans.
I know who my audience is, man. I know who my audience is.
I live right next to these guys. They smell.
If it wasn't for us, you'd have nothing but World in Flames to play down there, right? So
that's right.
Well, hold on, Clint. You said something about in 1914, before World War I, before Gallipoli, you said that's when we became a nation.
Yeah.
So what were you before? Still criminals from Botany Bay or something?
Yeah, basically. Yeah, it's give you a very brief background of Australian history, which I don't want to bore your audience too much, but we were a colony. We became federated in 1901 in the same sense that Canada became federated probably in the 1860s. So we were sort of our own country. The Queen or the King is still our head of state, but we have our own parliament.
Yeah, same with us. Same with us.
Yeah, so pretty boring stuff. But Gallipoli was the first time that we fought under our own flag with our own officers at the divisional level. We'd fought in the Boer War under British officers, but Gallipoli is the first time we fought under our own officers. And it was called our baptism of fire. And the great newspaper headline from the time was, it's not a newspaper, it's actually from a poem. It's, we now know what nations know and feel what nations feel, because we've fought together as a nation on this battlefield, and we lost. It was a tragedy too. We lost that battle. We had to withdraw. So it's it becomes part of our national mythology. And in fact, tomorrow is Anzac Day, like here in Australia. Tomorrow,
yeah.
Tomorrow's Anzac Day, so it's a public holiday. Everyone
look at that, man.
Yeah, it's and I'm gonna actually, remind me, but I'll put this out on Twitter. If anyone wants to try my Gallipoli game, I'll post about this. But just send me an email. I'll send you the game, because it still hasn't been released yet, so people are still playtesting it. But I do have a very quick Gallipoli game that you can play it in about 1 hour. It's kind of like 1 hour World War II. No dice, no cards, very, very simple. It's going to be quite a compact, cheap game, but it covers the Gallipoli campaign. And you can learn a little bit about what Australia went through in World War I from that.
Mm-hmm. Clint, I'm a little concerned about your obvious lack of sleep, to be honest, with all these projects in the pipeline.
It's a lot. Yeah, it's a lot.
I'm exhausted just listening to you talk, to be completely honest. Secondly, have you guys gotten rid of the king off the money yet and replaced him with Kylie Minogue yet, or is that a next year thing?
No, the British monarch is still our head of state. That's how it works.
Okay.
Yeah, the British have a bigger military than we do. We're gonna get rid of the king. What's the matter with you?
I got no problem. I think Kylie Minogue would be much more attractive on the money personally, but I was not consulted.
You and I were connected somehow. I don't know. I guess it's the Queen, but whatever. But you see these blowhard Americans? I got no problem with them. I'll have a drink while pressing a button. Hey, my wife drives a vacuum cleaner. I was going to say an F-16, but the joke or whatever.
Yeah, look, I like Americans. I like Canadians. I've lived in Canada for a little while, and I have nothing but love for the broader Anglosphere. So
come on, what Anglo?
Except for the British, of course. Don't forget, all the rest of the Anglosphere is also irritated at the British as well. So
Quebec, La Nouvelle France.
I'm just saying.
In Quebec.
You guys aren't even Anglosphere up there. You're practically French.
Not the Francosphere.
You should want, I don't know, Voltaire on the money or something like that, right?
Yeah.
There you go. Or some famous Canadian like Gordon Lightfoot or Neil Young or something. Give me some Canadian $10 bills with Neil Young on them. I'll paper the fucking house with them. I'm just saying. Dan Aykroyd's Canadian too. I didn't know that.
Everybody's Canadian.
Apparently, yes.
Saturday Night Live is Canadian. Who do you think?
That's basically accurate, yes. I think Eddie Murphy was the only one not from Canada at one point on the show, to be honest. So,
you know what?
In answer to that question, I will eventually start getting into Australia in World War II type of games. I do have, but the Gallipoli one will come first. And I also was talking to Volko recently about his new game, Coast Watchers, which is about Australia in World War II as well, about a very small part of it. That's coming up on P500. And so that's a very interesting looking game too, about intelligence gathering in World War II.
Well, it's Volko, so you never know whether it is going to totally explode and then suddenly there will be 35 designs in the pipeline based on that system a year later. So, don't be shocked. I would not wager against Volko on that particular wager, personally.
Against Volko, nothing.
No, that's right. He's a very good designer, and
he'll send assassins after you if you badmouth him. So,
I think he's retired now, though. So I don't know.
So that's good.
I have a story with Eddie Murphy and I think the other comedian. I forget his name. Anyways, you want to hear the story?
No.
Okay.
Okay.
I thought we were talking about war games. Isn't that what the show's about?
We've been known to drift occasionally into random topics. Let's put it that way on this particular show. But it does sound like you, and I know we talked about the Gallipoli game when we talked last a couple of years ago. Did you to what extent? Because you were kind of public about the design for 1 Hour World War II. I always see it on Twitter, which I refuse to call by any other name, just for the record. To what extent was that useful at all in the design process? Was there useful feedback or comments that made you think about something that resulted in a design change? How effective was that?
Yeah. I really like posting on Twitter about game design stuff because very, very often
because it's better than anything else on Twitter right now, for one thing.
Yeah. I mean, Twitter's a bit of a mess at the moment, but there's still a solid wargaming community on there. That's the only reason I'm on there is for the wargaming stuff. But when I post a design question, like, I've got a particular thorny problem with this, very often someone will comment and give me just a straight up, very simple solution that fixes the problem. And I would be racking my brains for hours trying to think of that solution. And someone comes and goes, why don't you just try this? And I try it and it works. So a lot of my design process now is I'm almost like live tweeting the design process. Like when I'm stuck on a problem, I post about it and then people comment on it. And then usually the issue gets resolved. And so that's been really, really good. And it's kind of like how people like reading designers' notes or designer diaries. Mm-hmm. Basically, my designer diaries I put on Twitter. That's how I do it as I'm making the game.
Mm-hmm. I would buy this game, just FYI.
You know what, Sean Lambert, for God's sakes, man.
I think we could probably hook you up with Mark on this.
Oh, you mean this one about
the Great Emu War?
Yeah. I really like Mark Herman as a designer, so I'd love to work with him. I bought Empire of the Sun late last year and cracked it open. I've only played it through entirely once, but man, that is a beast of a game. That is
brilliant.
It's a brilliant game, but it's a lot of work. I'll tell you that.
Is it undoable?
No, by no means. But it is a lot of work. It's kind of high intensity. You can play it in a sitting, right? It's not an hour, but you could play it in an afternoon. That's not a problem. But it's pretty high intensity, and the mechanics are all very kind of tightly integrated, and you do have to read the rule book pretty carefully. So it is typical for people to go into that first game of Empire of the Sun, and they leave that game just like, I have no idea what I just did. I had no idea what I was doing while I was doing it. Nothing seemed to make sense. And then you play it a couple times and you get through all of that.
Yeah.
See, that's coin for me. What the hell am I doing? What's going on?
I think coin is relatively you just read the rule book, right? And I'm not a big rule book reader. I like learning games by setting it up and doing stuff. But I read the rule book for coin and basically figured it out. The core of it's not complicated. It's just all the little details.
That's right. Yeah, there's a lot of rule systems where there's just a lot of separate individual mechanics that are all very simple, and it's just remembering all the mechanics. And then there are games where the mechanics themselves are very big and very complicated. And I think Empire of the Sun is more like that, where if you want to understand the supply rules in Empire of the Sun, or the activation rules, it's not just remember these 10, discrete dot points. It's a whole system. Whereas coin is like, you do this, and then this chart moves up. You do this, and this piece goes here. It's every step is very simple. Here we go at ASL. Yeah, no, I haven't. I've not even tried Advanced Squad Leader. I don't own it. I have looked at the rules briefly and thought, no, I'm not going to try this. It's too much.
Looked at the rules.
That's fair.
It's a telephone book.
William Aarons, first of all, thank you so much for the support. It is much appreciated. So how far off the historical track can you go with the Poland? Does the Poland game have a title? First of all, so I can start calling it that instead of the game about the Poles.
I'll give you the working title now, which is
that's good enough.
Change is Cursed Soldiers, and that's the Cursed Soldiers is a term used in Poland to refer to basically these the members of the Home Army or the NSZ or other insurgent groups who went off to the forests after 1945 and kept fighting against the Soviets. They continued the war after 1945. But some Polish people have told me that's got connotations with like the far right, like sort of nationalist extremist type. So they don't like that word, cursed soldiers. So that may change it. For now, I'm just going to use that word. But in answer to that question, you can deviate fairly significantly from the historical path, but I did decide that the Soviets are going to conquer Poland in the game, because I don't see any other way historically for that to have gone down, simply because the Soviets are going to try and get to Berlin. Poland is right in the way. They kind of have to conquer Poland to win the war. So the Soviet Union is coming. Now, in answer to the question of can you spin it so that Poland ends up more like, say, Yugoslavia? Yes. The victory conditions are something like you might be able to get a situation where Poland is part of the Soviet sphere of influence, but it's not a communist country, or it's not a Stalinist country. It has some level of independence, right? So it's in the communist bloc, in the same sense that, like, in the Cold War, Vietnam and Bulgaria and Cambodia are all communist countries, but they're very different. Like, they all have very different levels of independence, right? So you might be able to spin a situation where Poland is part of the Soviet sphere of influence. There are Red Army troops on your soil, or say, local communist troops on your soil, whatever. But your government still has some level of independence, and you're not just totally a slave to Stalin. And the way you do that is the guerrilla war can continue and can be costly for the Soviets to really clamp down on the country, or the Polish Communist Party has to enter into agreements with the other political parties in order to govern the country. And those other political parties can voluntarily form a coalition with the Polish communists to run the government. And then they will have their voices heard in a more real way. So sort of, yes, you can have a slightly more independent Poland than one.
I think you're right, though, because by the time we're talking here, the Soviets are there, right?
Yeah.
What are you going to do? Ring Zhukov up and say, "Hey, could you take a left turn at who was that place right on the border? I forget. So they're coming through Poland one way or the other.
Yeah,
the army, right. Red Army's here, buddy. You're stuck with whatever happens.
Hey, Clint.
Yeah.
Oh, great.
Bialystok. That's the place I was thinking.
Bialystok.
For God's sakes, man.
The only reason I can remember it is because of Max Bialystok from the producers. Is the only way I can remember the name of the place.
Yeah. Yep. Bialystok is it's not the map of the game used to have that on there, but now it's more of an abstracted map. It only has 5 spaces. The whole map is only 5 spaces. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So, but I used to have Bialystok as its own place. Yeah.
What were you about to say, Dan?
Now you're embarrassing me in front of David Thompson.
Well, what's new?
Hey, David Thompson's in the chat. Hey,
David Thompson is in the chat. There's got to be a youngster off here on tonight's show.
What's he talking about next week? I'll see you next week.
Because we'll both be me, David, Herman Luttman, Brandt from the Armchair Dragoons, Ryan Howman, and probably some more people are all going to be hanging out together drinking whiskey at Buckeye Game Fest next week. That's the story. Of course you're invited, Dan. I've been talking to you about coming to this goddamn thing for the past year.
God, that David Thompson guy.
Every year I say, Dan, you should come down to Buckeye Game Fest. It's kind of drivable. You can split the hotel room with me. We can have hookers over. It's going to be great. And everyone, no, I can't. I got to work. I got to work.
Hold on. Let's get back to your Polish thing, Clint. I spoke to Yarrow a few times. Super nice guy.
Yeah.
Super nice. Very passionate. And he knows a lot about this Polish.
The insurgency? Is that the word you're looking for?
Look, I remember saying stuff that I thought I knew I was right there. I said, yeah, but Polish this and this and that. And he just nailed me. And he was saying, no, it's because it is. And it's because of that. And shit, I was learning stuff. Not that I remember, but I learned stuff. I learned stuff. You know what I'm saying?
Well, Yarrow is the co-designer of this game. So I've been working very closely with him. He's the co-designer. Yeah, and it helps.
Speaking of Yarrow, Yarrow.
Well, I posted the idea on Twitter a few years ago. So I want to make a game on the Polish Underground, and then he direct messaged me and said, if you make this game, Phalanx will publish it. I go, okay.
I actually, for my first thought was, there's a couple of Polish publishers. It would have been interesting to see one of them jump on it, right? A Tactica Strategia, and there's at least a couple more.
Yeah, they really punch above their weight. The Poles punch above their weight in terms of board game design. For a small country, you don't think of Poland as like a first world country, but
video games too.
Yeah. Yeah, and video games, absolutely, and even like The Witcher is based on Polish folklore. It's a very popular, Netflix series, video game, and there's a lot of Polish content out there, and a lot of game designers have a Polish background, and I've been learning so much about Polish history that I didn't know before, and I interact with a lot of Polish people on Twitter. They're all very passionate about their history, which I love. They know it really well, and things can get a bit
unlike Americans.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of those things where it's a smaller country, and a lot of people didn't take it seriously for such a long time. And even I know people that know a lot about military history, and they go, "Oh, Poland, that's that country that the Germans just stopped in 1939, and then that's it, and that's all you ever hear from it." No, Poland historically has been a serious country. It's not. It's not. People think of it like, it's like Luxembourg. It's a little country that gets stomped on, and then it disappears. I mean, no, it's not. It's a real country, and it is
most powerful country in Eastern Europe for several hundred years, as I recall, until it got divided up between the Prussians, the Austrians, and the Russians in the various partitions of Poland.
Yes, that's right, and so I now see Poland in my mind. It's on the same level as, say, I don't know, France or Sweden or Spain or whatever, like those countries that you think of historically as in military history, they are. They're up there.
And they never lost the Polish identity either, even when they were part of, even when most of Poland was part of the Russian Empire.
I remember meeting a Polish girl, and she looked at me and says, "You're big like bull, strong like horse."
Yeah. Look, I'm a fan of Polish girls as well.
I'm terrified of the people that Dan runs into on a daily basis up in Canada.
You should be.
But apparently I should be. So Jeff Beeler's literally putting his money where his mouth is. Jeff, thanks for the support. $2 Canadian to suggest the Fighting Republic, Poland, 1939 to 45. So I guess feel free to use that or change the dates if you need to.
Yeah, is that a book or a game that he's recommending, or is that a title?
No, I think he is suggesting a title.
Yeah, well, that would be good if I don't start in 1939, but who knows? Maybe I could extend it the time frame back. But yeah, the Fighting Republic sounds cool. The only thing that makes me hesitate on that title is it's specifically about the insurgency with these 4 factions rather than just the Polish Republic as one thing. But still a good title. Anyway.
I told you David Thompson doesn't like me. Look.
White Eagle Rising.
He's avoiding me.
Or what? Did Ryan Heilman do a game called White Eagle Defiant? I think he did.
Oh, he's got a CSR in now. What's that?
No, that's not the game I'm talking about, though.
Yeah, there's been a few about the Polish-Soviet War of 1921, which, as a little digression, the
Red Star White Eagle, offhand.
Yeah, the board game Scythe. I don't know if you guys have heard of Scythe. Which
I am vaguely aware of it as something.
It's not really a war game. It's more of I guess it's like a Euro game. But Scythe is an alternate history steampunk game set in alternate history 1920s Eastern Europe, based on the artwork of Jakub Brzezinski. If you're a war gamer, check it out. Not because the gameplay is all like it's not going to appeal to you if you're a hex and counter war game or anything like that. But the artwork of the game Scythe is, I think, the best artwork of any game ever made. So, it's the artist is Polish, and it's all about Poland in the 1920s. So if you look at the game Scythe, so SCYTHE, just for the artwork alone is worth the cost. It's a nice little Euro game that you can play with. That's the
steampunkish one, right? Steampunk.
Yeah, it's got big giant mechs like these big walkers and stuff.
But it's like steam. Yeah,
it's steampunk. It's just steampunk or diesel punk. You just call it diesel punk because it's got this petrol engines and so on. But the point of that game was it's an alternate history Polish-Soviet war in the early 1920s. And it's really cool. It's just a really cool setting, and that's all about Poland. So I think best art of any game that I've ever seen. So check it out.
I think that is more information than I have hitherto had about that particular game. I've of course seen it.
Yeah.
Right.
What the hell is that, Old English?
Yes.
I am hitherto had.
Wait, we Gardena. Anyway, so that's about all the Beowulf I could tell you in Old English, but first 3 words. There's a dude on YouTube that does a reading of, it's abridged, of course, because it would take 15 hours to do it unabridged, of Beowulf in Old English, and it's pretty awesome. Yeah. Highly recommend. Benjamin Bagby is his name.
Bagby, yeah.
Benjamin Bagby, Beowulf. Search for that on YouTube and it'll come up. It's awesome stuff.
You know
anyway,
Marcello Mastroianni.
Dan, that's a different tradition. David Thompson loves you, Dan. Just so you know.
You're tapping my phone. You're tapping my phone.
That's Volko. Yeah, but that aside. All right, folks. Clint, I want to say thanks for coming out tonight, especially. It's 9 a.m. or something like that where you're at. So it's not like you're in Italy where it's 4 a.m. or something insane hour.
What's wrong with Italy? What's wrong with Italy?
But there's nothing wrong with Italy, but it's like, what is it? Italy? It's about 2 a.m. there right now, and the Italians won't come on our show. That's the problem. Dan, make some calls. Get some Italians to come on our show. Okay? I know Maro.
If you want me to come back, I'm happy to do it. It's, yes. This time slot is fine as long as I'm not working. Do you guys do this on a Tuesday night all the time? Is this a regular Tuesday thing?
We've moved a couple times, but it is currently a regular Tuesday thing. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Cool.
So I'm just a lackey here. I'm just here for my looks, man. I don't make no decisions. I don't have nothing. Nothing.
Dan's going to do all the work for next week's show, featuring a guest to be determined later. So, all right, Clint, once again, thanks so much for coming. And once you've got the whatever the Polish game is going to be called, we're going to call it the Polish game from now on. Once you've got that in the actual pipeline, let's have you back and we'll talk about that and maybe show off some of that very fancy phalanx art that they're going to have for it.
Yeah. So that hopefully we'll have that by next year. That's my goal, is to have that ready to go next year. But for now, focusing on basically marketing 1 Hour World War II, because that's going to be coming out next month.
Yeah. Do they plan to is the Worthington timetable include shipping that this year as well?
Well, I don't think so. They do a lot of Kickstarters. They've done like 80 Kickstarters, which I don't know how they do it, but they just keep pumping them out. And so I messaged them the other day. I said, look, when are we thinking of launching this one? They said they're waiting on a big shipment of several games to come in. They've got to send those out. So look, there's always delays with Kickstarters. I've never run one on my own, so I don't know. But I would hope that 1 Hour World War II is done and shipped by the end of this year, by the end of 2024.
Okay, fair enough.
Yeah. And then 2025, the Polish game will take center stage in my design process.
Well, we will.
What's he saying?
He's saying that thank you, Dan, for being on the show, is what he means.
I'm a bug.
No, he's saying not a bug. Do you see the word that starts with the letter N? That's the letter that's looks like the upside down U. That means not a bug. Not that thing. Okay. All right, folks, we are out of time. Stick with us next week where we will be broadcasting live, or I'll be broadcasting live from Buckeye Game Fest, and Dan will be broadcasting live from his toilet.
Clint, so don't split. Don't stick around.
Everybody have a great rest of the night. We'll see you all again soon.
All right. Thank you.
Big move. Big. The moose is loose. Big moose. Big. The moose is loose.